All right, moving on here. We got bombshell audio from Ted Cruz plotting to overthrow the election. We've heard a lot of discourse from the far right about how January 6th was simply a mob that lost control and Trump didn't want them to do what they did. And there was a bunch of bad apples that spoiled the bunch, and it was mostly a peaceful protest. And mostly everybody there was peacefully demonstrating, and that the purpose was for the American people to be able to voice their honest concerns that they had about the election. We've all known that this is bullcrap, and that in fact it was a coup plot that was being discussed by various members of the government. Okay, from November 20th, 2020 up until January 5th, 2021. The plotting and scheming and planning was happening. This is just a bit more direct evidence of it. So let's go ahead and play this audio clip here, and we'll listen to a little bit of analysis as well here on MSNBC.
We're looking at this January 6th certification. All of the options that were being discussed were problematic. The mechanism to try to force that is denying certification on the 6th.
Who's deciding who gets inaugurated?
It would be the results of that commission.
I'm joined by Michael Steele. Your reaction?
Wow. So before we listen to this analysis here from Michael Steele, I just want to note the tone of her voice. It's almost, she has this inquisitive, sort of a bit confused tone to her voice of, well, who's gonna decide who's inaugurated? Who's gonna decide that? It's almost as if the light bulb is going off in this person's head, and I'm not sure who this lawmaker is. But you can almost hear the light bulb going off inside of her head that, oh my God, we're trying to steal the election, aren't we? That's what we're doing here. We're stealing it.
Masterclass. Look, this absent paper trail and kernels here and there is confusing. It is difficult because there's so many pieces that we don't have, right? You filled in a lot of that information, and the fact that you got the reaction from the senator's office and the senator himself tells me that you struck a nerve. And the reality right now, and this goes to what you said in the beginning of this of your conversation with the audience, is Jack Smith and the entire January 6th team now are looking at this. And this is another piece that's going to fit in very nicely. It's not just what, the players that we once knew about. Now you've added a senator who says, hey, yeah, I had this conversation. And then you got the quiet part, right, with Borromo, when she's asking, well, then how does this work? Well, the commission, clearly, we'll stop it there. This is the whole point, is why we're doing what we're doing.
Do you almost get the impression that although the reason he was talking to her is that she was supportive, you almost get the impression that behind the scenes, people were starting to really absorb, oh, y'all just going to steal this. That's the plan.
Well, yeah. Look, there was, you can almost sense, if you go back at that time, and particularly if you take everything that we now know and go back, you could almost feel the urgency and the sort of rush to try to get this thing done quickly. And so there was a lot of urgency around the idea of, because they're on a constitutional clock. You can't lose sight of it. This is what tripped up the Democrats in Bush v. Gore, was that constitutional clock, right? You had the same requirements here. On January 6th, this is going to happen. So if you don't have a plan in place by January 5th, January 6th doesn't happen the way you hope it would happen. And so a lot of these early conversations between the 21st of November and the 5th of January is what you're now putting out here. And these are just additional pieces that are filling in some of those background noises that we now realize, oh, that wasn't noise. That was actual planning. That was actual conversations, sort of thinking through, how do we do this?
So to me, it begs the question of, what else is out there in terms of direct evidence of plotting? We've heard the January 6th committee's evidence and how well that was laid out, and how we heard lots of communications from Cassidy Hutchinson and Mark Meadows, other Trump aides, their really disbelief as to what they were planning to do. But this is really interesting because Ted Cruz, being one of the top Republicans really in the country, one of the most notorious Republicans anyways, it really just begs the question of what else is out there in terms of communications that has been intercepted. Who has this information, and when are we really going to know the full picture of what transpired from not only on January 6th, but from November, like Michael Steele here said, from November 21st to January 5th. We know that there was plotting. We know that there was planning. We know that the mob that was being directed to be at the Capitol on the 6th, we know what their purpose was now. I just really would like to know, personally, what else do we have on these guys? And how many years is it going to be until we really know everything that happened and just how bad it got and how far away from American democracy the GOP was operating, not only today but during that time period? And just the sheer scale of the debauchery and the utter contempt for the American people's vote, and the utter contempt for every single person who voted for Joe Biden. It makes my stomach, makes this pit in my stomach feeling, just knowing how far and how far they were willing to go to subvert the 2020 election. Really not a good look here for Cancun Ted Cruz. But given his constituents in Texas who reelected him after a not so great 2020, and after he flew to Cancun during the deep freeze in Texas, they reelected him. So I don't really think that this is going to move the needle at all in terms of MAGA people. They're not paying attention to this stuff anyways, and they didn't pay attention to the January 6th committee that was held last summer. So another really interesting, damning piece of evidence against one of the top Republicans planning to overthrow a democratic election. Is it going to move the needle at all in terms of perception of the GOP? Unfortunately, I don't think so.